Jeez. Good morning. We are law enforcement agencies across the state of Texas, along with the African American Lawyers section of the State Bar of Texas. We have been collaborating to improve our communities and society, to foster relationships and communication, to get out in front of issues and concerns on both sides of this great opportunity. And so we have members from TMPA, we have members from North Texas, we have members from the DPSOA. Kevin Lawrence, who is usually with us, is unavailable today, and we're not sure if we're going to catch up with Houston's representative. Nonetheless, good morning. I'm Steve Foster. I am former counsel and committee director for the Texas Senate Committee on Criminal Justice, and also a member of the African American Lawyers section, along with our legislative chair, Nikki Chrisman Green. And we are very excited to have the opportunity to interface and continue this discussion with law enforcement agencies across Texas. If you don't know, we had a couple of topics we were going to discuss last week. We only were able to flush one out that we thought that we would want to continue. So today we want to discuss the one we did not get to, which is making internal affairs complaints public, to give people what we would say in the legal world notice in regards to bad actors. And as Kevin Lawrence has said, one thing that good cops don't want are bad cops. And if that's the case, we would like to have those readily and easily identifiable in regards to the public and others, especially I think when it comes to if those law enforcement officers move around the state and how we can know some of the activities if there is that type of movement, and then looking for rehiring. Fred, I know you have to go at 10:30. You want to start from your perspective and get this discussion going, please? Thank you.
Yeah, and it's been a discussion for, I've been on 25 years, and for the last 25 years, it's been the same discussion with this, and whether it be the media. When I started, it was mostly the media that wanted access to the IED, the making it online, easy to view, and I partially get that, and now we've moved to where activists are really wanting this online, and I'll give you an example of how things have gotten out of hand, where you have Ken Cassidy in Austin. He had to move his family out of his house, and so his family are living out of state right now because the activists have been constantly at his house, and he's just a spokesman, right? He's the president for the association. He doesn't have a bad history. He doesn't have any history, to be honest with you, when it comes to IED resumes and when it comes to complaints. You'll have officers that start out very young in their career. I'll speak for myself, who started off young in their career and were pulled out of basically training and sent to dope squads, to where we were at that time. Had a crack. Crack had taken over most of the country, and crack houses were everywhere in Oak Cliff that we worked. We still had the Jamaicans here that were producing a lot of drugs at that time, and they were very aggressive in their drug styles. We still have Jamaican door locks that are in dope houses that are called Jamaican door locks because when the Jamaicans came here and opened up dope houses, they reinforced so police could not get in or take a long time to get in. And so you have those cases that you work when you're younger, and you have to work them aggressively. The complaints don't come from the police. complaints come from the neighborhood. The neighbors and the community want these places shut down because these places work 24 hours a day. They don't take off on holidays like most of us do, whether it's Christmas, Easter, whatever. They still continue to work, and everything that comes with them brings crime. And so these communities want them shut down, and with that comes aggressive officers to shut them down. And another thing that comes with that is complaints. You will get more complaints out of working drugs than anything on this department, on any department, because the drug dealers know how to use IED. They'll use their family to make the complaints, and you'll get a lot of complaints. You'll get a lot of complaints that are unsustained, but there'll be a lot of complaints in that jacket from a period of time. Anybody that works any of those type of aggressive groups in any city, especially big cities, are going to get those complaints. Now let's go back and look at those complaints if you put them online.
Fred, will you say what IED is just for the
internal the internal affairs division of each department?
Okay.
The internal affairs department of each department is run by officers on the department. They're run by a detective, sergeants, a lieutenant, and you're gonna have a major over it and a chief. And so you have it's a safeguard. So when your complaint goes in, and these complaints, I mean, I don't know what the average is in the United States, but I promise you it's well over a year for one complaint. And so these complaints go through that chain from the public side to that chain and get reviewed. They have to see if they have a complaint. Then it comes back down to where they're going to call the officer in. The officer sometimes may be the last person to come in. They may contact the complainant, whoever complained, contact the witnesses from the complainant, then contact the witnesses from the officer's standpoint, and then finally contact the officer and bring him in. So you've got an open investigation. That officer cannot quit, or if he does, he's going to get more likely an F5 from TCOL, and he will not be able to just quit and pick up and go get hired somewhere else. Because if they don't do their proper background, they shouldn't be hiring him. Does that happen? It does. Does it happen as much as it used to? No, because he was quitting under investigation, and his TCOL license is now subject to be, flagged. And so you've got this investigation that goes on and on and on, and it's really a damning portion of a career for somebody. Not only if you put that online, there has to be parameters, right? Because if you wanted to get his jacket of what he's done, I know the media can get it. I know that there's ways to get it. Like, let me ask you guys right now, if you had to get the discipline of an officer, how would you guys go about doing it?
You would have to do a public information request, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep. You can do that, or if you work with the prosecutor, I mean, that's another way as well. A good point that I want to make.
And that's only when if it goes to a prosecutor for a case, because in most of them, they don't even get out of the internal affairs department. And I think when we talk about the outcry, a lot of that is why they have the outcries, because they don't really truly understand what all is in the jacket, right, for the officer. You bring up some good points, Fred, with respect to what you're saying with different things that may come into the jacket. And so my question would be, how can we balance? Because in some cases, I think that the delay or not providing that information, even if you put it in a public way, is there not a way to distinguish between the information that is provided so that it can help and meet some of those needs, and also provide, like you said, due process? Because if an officer is not even involved in a case and you pull up a jacket and then you find other people's names in there and you start to maybe target or make them. Yeah, that's a concern. And so, but at the same time, there's information when you get it out there and you allow, and it kind of adds to transparency when you are allowing, you know, those that are, even if it's just those that are directly involved in the case, to have that information.
I'll give you another example, like on an attorney. If an attorney has a bar, you know, as an investigation going on, or an inquiry on his bar license or her bar license, no one cares. I mean, to be honest with you, when well, to the general public, well, let's put it this way: to a criminal attorney, all right, that's going to hire, you know, that usually is going to get hired by someone that's getting criminally prosecuted. They don't mind that as much. But if society in itself will target an officer, and the reason why we're targeted is because groups will then publish this on their websites, and it doesn't mean that everyone on there is like, oh my God, look at Frederick Frazier. He got 4 complaints when he was over, you know, from 95 to 97, and look how bad of an officer he was then. No, that's when I was working in a dope squad. That doesn't mean I was a bad officer. That's mean I was the most aggressive time of my career. That's when I was young, strong, fast, and working dope houses. And so they're never going to look at the 200 plus combinations. They're never going to look at that, because that's also on that jacket. They're only going to look at that piece of, look at the complaints he got right there. And then they're going to go down that list and put everybody that, like, they'll make a list, like, I'll give another example. In Houston, and Doug just checked in here. In Houston, they have a website up about Houston shootings, officers shooting, and they publish as much as they can on there. And it's a very target-rich environment website against the officers. And it doesn't mean the officer did a bad deal. It means he got in a shootout with a bad guy, but they target that officer. And you would see that if you publish that without parameters, right? Without parameters, if you publish it the way, like, that it's been told to me from our activists here, we're like, if you do it that way, all you're going to do is make it harder for us to recruit where it's already hard. You're gonna shame officers that are good officers. And you have to remember, when you have an officer, you just don't have an officer. You have a family. You have an officer, his wife, his children, and his mom and dad and their in-laws. So you have a unit, right? So now they're all looking at him going, what the hell were you doing? And he's like, look, I'm working. This is part of my work. I can't help it if I'm getting a complaint, because you can get a complaint and not be validated, but you're still going to go through an investigation. Anybody can go right now to IAD and say, Frederick Frazier kicked the shit out of me yesterday. And now they're going to have to start an investigation to figure out if I kicked the shit out of somebody yesterday. And that's going to slow me down. And now the public gets that, like, can you believe he just kicked the shit out of somebody? And I go through that investigation, and now that's online. And now it looks like I kicked the shit out of somebody and I didn't touch them. And
so Fred, can we as lawyers that understand this term of reasonableness shape at least what we would have? Again, we're not media, and I'm in it, so I understand them. And we're not activists, although we're active. We want to be active participants with you, because one of the things that makes, I think, good lawyers is proper framework of an issue, of a situation, one that judges, juries, or any type of trier of fact, and the people that are your clients and witnesses. If you properly frame things, I think it makes it for a lot more clarity. I can't speak for media or activists. We're collaborating with law enforcement because what we would want to have as a product would be a collaborative effort that just doesn't have just what goes with no explanation. I think Nikki was always getting to the fact of, can we have some explanation that goes along with what's going on? Because absolutely, crime fighting is not, a flowery, pretty job at times.
Never will be.
And it never will be. So to couch it just as a regurgitation of fact that just happened and throwing it out there, you come to a different scenario than if you couch and frame things so that people can go, oh, Lawyers looked at this and they worked on this to provide a different perspective of the same information. And I can give you a whole bunch of examples of things that look bad if you just let them go out. And then you go, oh, well, okay, I understand now. That's a little bit different than just the narrative itself.
And you brought up a great point there. And the other thing about putting this online and just blanketing the internet with it is now you have a court system that's involved, and you're going to look at every single thing is going to be picked apart. We have a hard enough time getting juries here in Dallas, and I can't even imagine what it's like in Harris County to look at an unbiased police force up there when they're making an arrest. And that's why we have so many pleas, and that's why Harris County has so many pleas. We've got great cases that go, but we're so worried about the jury pool of what they're thinking of police officers that we don't even mind about the police sometimes.
Doug,
and I'm gonna play.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, before you do that, if I could just play devil's advocate, because some of the activists, some of the information that, like you said, you've been talking with them and you're listening to what they're asking for. And I think some of the reason why they ask for this blanket information, or they look at the information should be released, is because sometimes in some cases, in most cases actually, you'll have like if someone is hurt, use of force, because I don't think that they're asking for it in everything, but when there's a use of force issue, or a police a case involving a death with the police, those individuals' records are put out there, and they are, and I know that they're public information, especially if they're criminal records, but with the speed that information is released, it almost seems like it's okay for their information to be released, but not the officers. And as in the activist mind, and in those looking, they feel like there's an extra layer of protection being added for those officers. So when I say balance, that's what I mean.
There is an extra protection. There's 80,000 officers in the state of Texas. How many people do we have in our state? We're 30 million. Okay, so we have 80,000, 30 million. So if where I live, where my family lives, and then I think you would feel the same way. I think you would really, if you got to think about that for a second, what you just said. Or is my family worth it? Right? You guys might, somebody may think I'm not, right? And I get that. But is my family worth it? Sorry about this.
Oh, you're fine.
My phone, I'm on my phone and it started to ring. So is my family worth it? And that's what it comes down to. Every officer's thinking. So I'm here because society thinks that, hey, I've signed up for the job. I get that. You know what? I'll fall on the sword on that one. That's fine for me. But I know that Tracy and I might know my kids didn't. And so if that's where you want to know my name, and it's so important for you to know my name because there was a death in custody, because I've had one of those before, and it was an overdose. It's a person we're struggling with, and which happens all the time. And so is my family worth? You need to know my name that bad because of that guy, and then they have a family member or somebody that is crazy enough to go find me in my house and take care of my family. And when I say take care of them, hurt them. And
right.
And so and that's where the protection is. You got to remember, we're completely outnumbered. We're with 30 million versus 80,000. That's all we got. And so in cities that are hostile, because we do have hostile cities, that they will find your house and your family. And so we try as best we can to keep our officers and their families guarded for a period of time, so we at least can make sure that the investigation is not turning into a witch hunt.
Well, I'll tell you this, and Fred, I'm sure you know this, for certain occupations, there are enhancements in the law if you mess with a public servant or something to that effect. Yep. I'm not sure if that's about peace officers. However, if there's anything that comes from that type of episode, as we would say, I think we should put the public also on notice. Listen, we're willing to give you information to identify bad actors. but we're not trying to give you information before something is determined for you to go to their home. I understand freedoms. Trust me, Second Amendment is used every day, all day about,
Yeah.
I can do this and I can do that. But again, if it creates a public nuisance, an unsafe environment, that's where lawyers have to also be smart and say, there's a balancing test that we have to use about, do we need to know Frederick Frazier's name right now? Have his exposure be more than him? Or do we recognize this information is needed, but to the
let me give you the
even
hey, before I gotta go, let me give you the example how Sean King did it 2 weeks ago. So everyone knows the act. He's an writer or whatever you want to call Sean King. And so Sean King says if they don't release the officer's name within like hours, he is going to start releasing every name of every officer and their home address.
I saw, and that was wrong. Yeah,
it's wrong, but nobody called. Not one person.
Actually, Fred, a lot of people called them out. A lot of people called them out. And
well, but there needs to be that balancing test that if you create the environment,
yeah,
you know, again, it's a balancing test of freedom of speech. And now you go to First Amendment and the fact that you're creating harm with citizens. And I think that's probably the synergy and genesis of why we're talking. We're trying to, again, protect and serve and eliminate civil unrest. That creates civil unrest.
And that kind of, right, and that kind of behavior is definitely, and I saw that, Fred, and I also saw a lot of legislatures, a lot of other activists, and a lot of other organizations immediately condemn him for that, because what it does is it distracts. And I think
I don't support it. I just want to go on record. I don't support that.
But it's a distraction. It's a distraction, and it's a distraction.
Thank you both for saying that.
No, it's a distraction from the internal affairs investigation, because from what I support, and from the whole purpose of being as actively involved as we are, it's to support a fair and thorough and speedy investigation. So that you're not going a year later, hey, arrest the cops. The Breonna Taylor issue is one of those. Like, there are a lot of issues where there's just a lot of uncertainty. And Doug has talked about that before. It would be nice if you had a way to immediately somehow address the situation without throwing that information out there. So I would agree with you, Fred. I think a public database could be troubling, because it's no to where that information is going to go or how it's going to be used. And you have a lot of crazies out there. However, I do think that there should be some kind of way you can balance it and limit the information that is made available, or even the parties that it's made available to. Because as an attorney representing a family, if I wanted to meet internally and we did that under confidentiality, then I would think that should not be an issue, so that I can start gathering facts. And maybe it needs to be after, like you said, a certain period of time. I know in certain cases, the officers have like 48 hours or a certain time frame for that. And so maybe even doing it at that time, a public database where you just release every single thing in an internal affairs jacket, it's not going to be helpful to anybody, because people don't understand that. Just like when lawyers get a complaint, we have to go through, they'll send us a letter, they'll say, you got a complaint. If everyone saw a complaint that every attorney got, then they'd be like, what is going on? I got a complaint one time because I wouldn't take a case pro bono, because I went through and gave somebody their money back. So if somebody saw that, it did get processed, so it doesn't show up. But I'm sure that the state bar keeps a record of all of the complaints. So I get what you're saying.
It's called a comprehensive report on your bar system. It will be on there. No different than the unsustained complaints that are on my IAD jacket or any other IAD jacket for any officer in the country. It's going to have a comprehensive report. That's going to, it doesn't matter.
You're not in the game if you don't get a foul or two. You know what I mean?
That's what I was told. I was told by a judge that you were not a good attorney until you had at least one complaint. And this complaint was so far out there. Like, I wouldn't.
Hey guys, I gotta go. Okay. I've got to run to this other deal. They're beeping me. Thank you all.
Thanks, Fred. Appreciate you. We'll see you soon. Doug and Clay, thank you for continuing.
Chime in on that.
Could there be something that allows for, and Travis, that allows for a time frame once certain parameters are hit, you can add to that database at that appropriate time? So therefore you do balance and protect. It's still important, even if that officer is going to be dealt with and there is some discipline, there still should be a safety factor of them doing their job that doesn't have a ripple effect into their family.
I think you could make it by, I mean, I don't know, badge number, something like that, where maybe the name's not released. It just depends on what you're talking about. And I want to apologize. We had an emergency situation going on right now, so I'm running back and forth between here and our.
No problem.
We appreciate your time.
No problem.
I have to leave at any minute. Just give you the heads up on that. And I missed the first part. So I'm assuming we're talking about officers that have sustained complaints. The non-sustained complaints against, and I will use myself as an example. I've had a ton of complaints filed. First task force here, we had an attorney by the name of Ed Baby arrested. He said, every time I arrest somebody, that guy needs to on me, get me out of that neighborhood. I wrap up. I mean, he complained on me 6 separate times because I kept arresting her sons. I kept putting him in jail. They kept getting out. I arrested him again. It got to the point where I had my lieutenant go make the arrest for me because I was on the scene. Anybody can complain for anything. So non-sustained, I've got an issue with. I don't think they should be out there. But doesn't all this, there's fire. That's not accurate. I'm sorry. I just can't get into that. I know you talked.
I was going to say, you're breaking in and out a lot. It's hard to hear you.
But I think what you're getting at, Doug, is you had a situation of repetitiveness and you got complaints because people were repeat offenders. And so you said, okay, I'll back off. I'll have someone else step in. Nonetheless, you were the one that was receiving their complaints, even though you weren't, just for being on the scene.
Because their attorney said, it was like court. I go, are you under investigation right now? And I have to say yes. Yes. The department didn't do their due diligence to get the complaint done quickly enough. And he out in the jurors' minds. And so I write a lot of complaints.
So I know you're fading in and out, and I'm not trying to say I'm a great lip reader, but you're saying the department didn't give you the support. So when you were required to be in court, the defense attorney could set you up in a sense to make you look like a bad actor, even if you were just on the scene. It was a legitimate complaint and arrest, but because Doug was there was a complaint going on, you could always make it look like, hey, he's under investigation. Why is my defendant being arrested when we have an officer with continuing complaints made by the mom on the sons that were repeat offenders?
Correct. And I'll give you another example. It depends on, I know Ms. Dickey there talked about, use of force or death in custody cases. I've actually had 3 death in custody. 2 were narcotics ingestions, and the other was a guy that killed himself, but because we had him barricaded in, that is considered a death in custody. We have to also watch, because each department may do that differently. You understand what I'm saying? But for us, anything where they have been in custody or we were in an attempt to detain them, it's considered an in custody death.
Why is there a flexibility, and is there a way to create uniformity so you're not seeing that from department to department? Because again,
that was going to be my question. That was going to be my question too.
And that's just something that we would have to get a state level to say, look, this meets the parameters of an in custody death. This does not. If I roll up on a scene and I go knock on the front door and the guy kills himself, technically that can be considered a death in custody in Houston. We would have homicide come out, do the full investigation, everything else. It's kind of odd, but or I get in a chase and the guy dies during the pursuit. Let's say he runs through a red light and gets hit by an 18-wheeler. That is also considered a death in custody. Though I haven't put hands on him, it is still a death in custody.
Who's making this determination?
Yeah, I was going to
Yeah.
say, this kind of brings us back, I think, to the same scenario we were talking about a couple of weeks ago with the F5 in some of the categories, because and so if there was a way to kind of bring some uniformity and maybe even a different category so that way they can be broken out, that might help, because I didn't know that every single one of those cases would be looked at as a death in custody. So then when you bring in like a police shooting, it's going to be lumped in with someone that's overdosed. And so the numbers could be different. And if there's not really a way to break that apart, then I could see where the data could be manipulated. So that's a good point. I didn't see that.
Well, and again, I think a lot of the points that are being brought up, I think there is time to revisit some of these things that are antiquated, that give the mere appearance of something that maybe it's not. I would have not known those situations as fact patterns would qualify.
Me either.
In Houston, it's the 4th largest city in the country. You can't tell me in our state that's a comforting thing if I'm a citizen, because I go to Houston. Texans games, Astros games, family, friends, events. You're having so many things go on, but the inconsistency that you would see, and we want to vet all this out. I'm not sure how much we can get done, but we have to mark these things to revisit them and have them figured out in the 21st century, given the circumstances in our country.
Right. And I do think a lot of this, like you said, it's going to be a state need to be taken up maybe on the state level to provide that uniformity, because a lot of this, just hearing how the different departments are operating even in different cities, different large cities, and then bring in the smaller little rural cities. And so you are going to run into some situations where you may have one thing here and one thing there. And one thing that Fred had talked about before you jumped on, Doug, was in the internal affairs investigation, which is kind of how we started this topic. If someone were to leave in the middle of the internal affairs investigation, if the background check, like we talked about before, is not properly done, then that throws a different wrench in there. And you have officers that don't follow that. I mean, not officers, but certain departments that don't follow that process as well, or do it as thoroughly. And so when you add all of that together, you do get inconsistency. And so from the outside looking in, I'm looking in and I'm saying, you guys should be able to do this. There has to be a way, and you're just trying to hide or add a layer of protection. But when you go through some of these other conversations, I can see where it would be looked at one way versus someone from the outside looking in. So if we could have that kind of accountability and transparency and education, I think that could help a lot. But I definitely do think that some uniformity is going to have to be something that the state of Texas looks at with respect to certain procedures as it relates to the complaint process as a whole, and just in general, just the internal affairs and how those investigations are handled.
Yeah, because
I don't think that in a background check scenario, having some type of minimum standards, that all departments have to follow, whether it's your very small ones or your very large ones, at least some type of minimum standard to ensure that they're looking at those things. I don't think any of us have any issue with having something like that done. But again, that would have to be, like you were saying, at the state level.
Right. Travis, that was what we talked about, I think, during our very first call, and we were all in a consensus on that. And I think that helps, because when you have that minimum level of a background check, it not only helps the community, but it helps your departments as well, because then everybody is operating on the same level. So yeah, I definitely think that this has given us a lot to take back, especially with the legislative session coming up.
How is it,
ladies, gentlemen?
Yes.
Yes.
You gotta make a move, Doug.
Yes, sir. I apologize. I've got to get over to meet with the chief.
No problem, Doug.
All
thank
right.
you
Have
for
a
your
good
time. And
Thank you.
good luck. Good luck in Game 7.
You know it. We need it. We're gonna win. We're gonna win, no doubt.
I'm gonna hold you to that.
Thanks, guys.
Clay, how is it with troopers in the world of the Department of Public Safety? Do you follow your statewide agency? Do you follow the same protocols? Do you have the same type of difficulties and issues that Doug, Travis, Kevin, and Fred have talked about? Or is there more uniformity because you're one agency that has 254 counties under its belt?
That's a great question. Can you hear me? I want to make sure that you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay.
We can hear you. Right.
So our complaints are generally classified in two categories, probably much like the local authorities. They're administrative or criminal. Every piece of paper that a trooper provides has listed on the bottom of that citation this individual. Basically, the wordings goes something like, if you have a compliment or a complaint, you can log it here. You go on our website, there's the ability to do that is on the front page of our department website. So if it's an administrative complaint, generally that starts with the trooper supervisor. There's a process that's involved in that, and if he determines that it's something that if it's a violation of policy versus a violation of law, both the complainant is brought in, they file a written sworn affidavit, and then that will generate, we have instead of internal affairs, we have what's classified as the Office of the Inspector General, which those people are, while they wear a uniform with us, they respond to the Public Safety Commission, which is appointed by the governor of the state of Texas, and to the director, and who's also appointed by the Public Safety Commission. So from that procedure, if it turns into a criminal complaint, then our Texas Rangers get involved with the criminal aspect of it. And then depending on what the status of it is, the discipline is meted out. There are generally about 6 or 7 categories of misconduct that define what the conduct was and what the misconduct was, and then the ramifications of that misconduct. My understanding, and I'll check for next week, is that you can request an open records request, and I guess our general counsel would be the responding party with regards to what you see or can't see. Luckily, I haven't had a complaint back since in over 20 plus years because I've been in an administrative position for the last 20 plus years. So, but that's our general process. The overall complaint system from beginning to end has a time period of about 90 days. If it's going to go beyond 90 days, then the investigator has to advise the chain of command why it has to, he or she has to justify why it's taking more than 90 days to complete this investigation.
Clay, what's the appeals process for troopers in Texas?
There is a direct appeal to the director, person that runs our agency, and he can support it or he can deny it. I don't know statistically what the results of that are, but my guess is more often than not, the appeal process for the trooper is usually confirmed by the Public Safety Commission.
And so
whatever the director's decision is generally final with public safety. Now, the trooper, the state trooper can appeal that to the Public Safety Commission. They can have a hearing, and then the Public Safety Commission can decide, and that decision is final.
So if the decision is, if the trooper wins in their appeal, is that information then, can they apply or have that information redacted from their file or sealed?
That is what I'm not sure of, and I can get that answer for you, but I don't want to give misinformation out on this broadcast.
Okay, thank you. That would be great if we knew that.
Absolutely. Are you in the same position as Travis had mentioned, and having the minimum background standards be uniform for state troopers and DPS as well? Is that a favorable thing?
Are you saying with regards to the F5?
Travis, I think it was the background check for hiring. Is that correct? And I don't want to speak for you on that one.
Yeah, that's what I was referring to, is that because each agency does their own background checks and comes up with their own variable standards on what they're looking for, how much they have to do, things of that nature. I mean, I would assume since the troopers are a statewide agency, I mean, it'd be the same across the board for what they have to do. Yeah,
so I can thank you, Travis. So a general background, an investigation for somebody that's going to be employed with us When they show up for testing, it's a day-long testing where they do written and physical. And then we all of our applicants have to go through a polygraph. And there's a pre-employment polygraph. It's about 10 pages long that they have to fill out and complete and sign, stating that they're aware that any untruthful information on here is immediate grounds for dismissal. And so once they go to a polygraph, that polygraph operator reviews their pre-employment questionnaire and goes over specifics. And I did recruiting for about 2.5 years. So my message to my applicants was, be truthful. Everybody's got skeletons in their closet. If you're going to lie about it, that's what's going to get you fired. And what I mean by that, in my recollection of when I was in recruiting, was the general thing that gets most people on polygraph is falsifying information on drug use, alcohol, and theft. You know, that those were, in my recollection, the three most popular things that got them a failure on the polygraph. And so, as long as it's not a violation of criminal law, that to the extent that, you know, you couldn't be a police officer, my message to them was, be truthful, answer the questions to the best of your ability, because if not, then the polygraph operator is going to discover that.
Travis, what about, if nothing else, because we know there are departments that are small, and then there are departments that are extremely large, as Houston and Dallas, San Antonio, things of that nature. If there was an adoption of the 10-page questionnaire that the DPS state troopers have to have, and regardless if they're going to come under polygraph or not, the department would at least have kind of a sworn pre-employment questionnaire, that if in fact the agency finds out that you have, you know, if they don't use a polygraph, but you have in fact falsified one of your questions, that you would then be therefore removed. And at least we have something that is viable statewide from DPS that we could administer to all departments that are regional, municipal, and countywide. And again, even if you didn't use the polygraph, you have the answers on that can incriminate you at time that it is found out that you have in fact falsified this information.
Yeah, I don't think something like that would be unreasonable. I mean, most of your departments, in your larger departments for sure, follow some very similar process to that, using the polygraph as part of which you have to fill out your prior to that, you're going to fill out the questionnaire and go forward in that. But if they were actually, if we were to have a standard to where every department had to employ the polygraph, you know, obviously that would come with a cost.
Right. That's why I didn't implement that. But still, if I get you in a sworn statement and you perjure yourself because of that sworn statement, I got you anyway. So whether I use the polygraph or not, if it comes to pass that I know what you put on that questionnaire is falsified, I got you.
Yeah, so I mean, most departments, and I can't speak for all for sure, but most departments have some type of pre-hiring questionnaire that you have to fill out as part of the background process. Now, do they all? Again, Stephen, I don't know for sure. I can't, since it's not a standardized process. But something like that, you know, having that implemented, as a minimum standard, and I don't see that being an issue.
I mean, if you're going to use something on a statewide agency, I think that uniformity is something that I don't see how people could balk at, because again, it's that applicant filling this out. And if you're a trooper in Sweetwater, where there's not a lot of people, and you're a trooper outside of Dallas, yeah, there's differences in population that are huge, but you're still taking the same questionnaire, correct, Clay?
Yes, sir. It's a general questionnaire, and I agree with Travis. You know, a lot of it would depend on probably the agency's ability to do that. But they all probably have some sort of questionnaire that can hold that individual to penalties if he or she makes false information on it.
I'd like to welcome our chair of the African American Lawyer Section of the State Bar of Texas, Rudy Mateer. Rudy, good morning. We're almost at the end, but it's great to see you even for a couple of minutes as we have delved into due process and the internal affairs.
The internal affairs, right?
Yes.
So one quick question. You both have, Travis, and you both have spoken about this background questionnaire and the test and the polygraph, and all of that is great information. My question to both of you, and this is just your opinion, or you can also give us the facts. Is there an opportunity, or do you currently include any kind of implicit bias in that pre-screening job process? Any kind of questions that would indicate any concerns that you could kind of look at as a part of the background check? Is that done now, or is that something that that you've seen work in any of the other processes, if you've had an opportunity to look at those?
It's been several years since I was in recruiting, so I'd have to go back and look at it, but I don't recall during that initial questionnaire whether there was or not. I would lean on saying that there was not if I had to answer that.
And unfortunately, Nikki, I don't deal with that process, so I'm not exactly sure the information that they gather from the possible applicants.
Well, one of the things I think that uniformity you can add that to the uniformity because it is relevant in 2020. I apologize, Nikki. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I was going to say, I was just going to pose that as a follow-up question. Do you think that would be helpful as a part of that background check, or that would be instrumental to knowing your full view of the officer along with the background information that you get to evaluate them as a candidate?
I'm not sure what that looks like. I guess I need more information before I can say yes or no.
Okay.
I would say, knowing my department, and again, I'm retired now, but I would say that they would welcome it if they thought it was beneficial.
Okay.
Rudy, we have 2 more minutes before we stay on task. Is there anything that you would like to say or add to today's program, please?
No, nothing in particular. I just say that I've been really encouraged to see these discussions, how honest and frank they are, and how solution oriented they are, and how they're presented to not only just amongst ourselves, but to the public at large. I am seeing, and I'm concerned more and more by seeing people who aren't speaking, who aren't having these tough discussions, who aren't trying to find solutions, and instead are trying to hide in rhetoric. And to see what everyone is doing right here, to have this cross-pollination, to see the leadership that's being shown over here in a variety of different communities and subsets, that makes a difference. It really does. And you're setting an example, no hyperbole, for a lot of other people to follow. So I really do appreciate that.
I agree. Absolutely. I was going to say, Councilman Mateer, the information that we gained at the very beginning of the call, unfortunately, we weren't able to be there from Fred in our Dallas area, was very instrumental with respect to shining a light on the internal affairs, some of the concerns that the officers have with just blanketly sharing information, and there are valid concerns. And I think that as we advocate in our communities, especially as African-American lawyers, making sure that everybody is educated with using information gained from these conversations, also the solutions that are discussed, I think that they are going to be beneficial and definitely help bridge some of those gaps that we're seeing. So thank you, everybody, for these calls and conversations.
You bet.
Absolutely.
Glad to be a part of it.
Well, again, I think from this one, there can be, again, uniformity established across the state. And I think, it's great, as Travis has mentioned, that there are departments using a questionnaire, but I think maybe a standardized questionnaire that includes implicit bias and some updated perspectives and presence in that questionnaire is a valid use of that questionnaire. And I think an imperative, reasonable use of the questions that you would have on keep the same amount, but certainly switch in or switch out or add those. But I think the time is now to come with law enforcement to include those things that would make sense to help your departments and agencies determine the best applicants to protect and serve.
Great.
Absolutely.
Well, I would like to then say thank you to all who were involved today. Fred, Doug, Clay, Travis, Nikki, Councilmember Mateer and Chair, both chairs here, and myself and Alicia, who without her, none of this information gets disseminated on Facebook and recorded. You can go back and watch these. People have done that, and we certainly appreciate this. And I think the gathering and the delving into these issues will have us at some point in time gather up a lot of solutions and nuggets that we can put forth from our efforts. So we will see you next Wednesday at 10 a.m. and we will have the topics vetted from both sides, and we'll be ready to go for further discussions and solutions. We appreciate you. Have a great day.
Goodbye,
Thanks,
guys.
guys.
Bye. Take